Cars are great. They're big, they're fast, and they're useful. In the 60s, the streets were filled with Chevys and Fords, and fast forward to today where you see Teslas and Toyotas everywhere. We even start hearing more and more about these Chinese super brands stepping into the competition. Now the question is, which brand sells the most cars? Well, let's find out.
Chevrolet, the car for you and the USA.
While Chevrolet was doing alright globally in the 60s, they were nowhere close to the biggest in most parts of the world. But when it came to the US of A, they were completely dominating the market. The 60s really were Chevy's golden age. While the company had some quite successful compact and mid-size car models like the Corvair, the Chevy 2 and the Nova series, their sales couldn't even compare to what their family models did. Their full-sized Bel Air models were impossible not to spot in any suburban areas. But most importantly, their most iconic car, the Chevrolet Impala, was the best-selling car of that entire decade. In the 60s, the US was by far the largest market when it came to car sales. And while that title has recently gone to China, car culture is still incredibly massive in the US. So massive in fact that the total surface area of parking lots in LA is bigger than the entire island of Manhattan. It almost feels impossible to be a part of society in the US without owning a car. And in the 60s, when highways were being expanded and road infrastructure was being heavily developed, this was especially true. But towards the end of that decade, this was becoming true for many other countries as well. With all that foreign competition coming in, it was hard for Chevy to stay on top, and in 1970, a company that put a lot more effort into their international strategy, Ford, took over. In the 70s, Ford was on an incredible roll, and unlike Chevy, they were successful internationally, most especially in the UK, Europe and the US. In America, they were big on muscle cars back then, focusing a lot on their Ford Torino and Mustang lines. But their best sellers were actually their Ford F-Series trucks. To this day, these are the best-selling trucks ever made. In the mid to late 70s, when oil prices shot up and consumers were becoming less interested in muscle cars due to their high fuel consumption, they instead shifted their marketing further into their Ecoline SUVs and trucks. In Europe, on the other hand, the Ford Cortina and Ford Escort actually became the best-selling cars in the UK. And then in 1976, the launch of the Ford Fiesta was another huge win for the company. Ford would remain on top for quite a while, so let's talk about the runner-up on this list, Volkswagen.
How long will it last? Nobody knows.
By the early 1980s, Volkswagen had survived one of the biggest transitions in automotive history. Their legendary Beetle had carried them for decades, over 21 million units sold worldwide. But by then, the world had moved on. As new emission standards and the fuel crisis shifted tastes, the company was forced to evolve fast. So Volkswagen bet everything on a new generation of small European-style cars. The Golf, the Passat and the Polo. And would you know it, the gamble paid off. The Golf became an international success story, topping sales charts across Europe and challenging Japanese brands abroad. And its sportier twin, the Golf GTI, basically invented the hot hatch category. These being high-performance versions of standard hatchback cars. By the mid-80s, more than half of all Volkswagens sold worldwide were Golfs. In 1984, they also opened a manufacturing plant in China, thereby becoming one of the first Western car brands to outsource their manufacturing to emerging economies. This turned out to be a huge win for them, because by the 1990s they ended up controlling roughly 50% of the Chinese passenger car market, and that during a time where China was growing to become one of the largest car markets in the world. In the mid-90s, their growth started to slow down though, and a different brand would overtake it as the runner-up on this list. And within just 10 years of being in that spot, this brand would achieve the impossible. I'm talking about Toyota. By the early 90s, Toyota had already built a reputation for itself as the most reliable car brand in the world. They achieved this reputation with a production method unlike anything any other brand was doing. It was called the Toyota Production System, or TPS, a philosophy built on two main ideas: eliminate waste and continuous improvement. Instead of mass-producing cars and fixing problems later, Toyota focused on making every step of the process efficient, error-free, and adaptable. This went so far that workers on the assembly lines were actually instructed to stop the production immediately as soon as they saw the tiniest defect, something completely unheard of in the industry at the time. Their goal wasn't to produce as many cars as possible, but rather to consistently build the most reliable cars in the market. By the mid-90s, Toyota's quality control and efficiency were so refined that other car makers began studying their system, and some even copying it. Cars like the Toyota Corolla and the Camry became symbols of that precision. They were affordable, fuel-efficient, and built to last. Through this, Toyota earned a loyal customer base around the globe. Throughout the 80s, Toyota had quietly built factories around the world, in the US in 1984, in Canada in 1988, and the UK in 1992. These plants became a game changer in the 90s, as they allowed Toyota to produce cars locally, meaning that they were able to sell their cars for cheaper as they avoided import tariffs, but most importantly also leading to more customized productions, adapting their models for each market. Suddenly these cars didn't feel like Japanese imports anymore, but rather like they were custom made for the European or American market. In 1997, Toyota pushed innovation even further with the launch of the world's very first mass-produced hybrid car, the Prius. This was especially relevant in the 90s, as global warming discourse had only started to become a mainstream topic in 1992, the year that the very first Earth Summit was hosted. In 1997, the same year as the Prius launch in Japan, the Kyoto Protocol was passed. I won't bore you too much with the details here, instead I'll just say that this was the birthplace of carbon trading. By the early 2000s, the Toyota lineup covered every need, from the Corolla and Camry for families to the RAV4 and Land Cruiser for adventure. Meanwhile, Ford's global influence was slipping. Their focus on large trucks and SUVs didn't translate well outside of North America, and their quality standards couldn't quite keep up. In 2004, after years of steady growth and global expansion, it finally happened. Toyota overtook Ford to become the best-selling car brand in the world, the first Japanese car maker to ever do so. And they would stay in that spot for a really long time. The huge success of Toyota invited a wave of Japanese brands into this list, with companies like Honda, Nissan, and Suzuki all making it into the chart. But one company from South Korea also managed to slowly crawl up the ranks. Let's take a closer look at Hyundai.
Hyundai, future driven.
In the 1990s, Hyundai had a reputation for building cheap and low-quality cars. But by the 2000s, something changed. The company began one of the most impressive global turnarounds in the history of car making. Hyundai realized that if they wanted to compete with the likes of Toyota and Honda, they had to completely reinvent how people saw the brand. So instead of just chasing low prices, they focused on improving their design and the overall quality of their cars. The first step was to start manufacturing in the markets they sold in. They built new factories in the US, China, India, Turkey, and the Czech Republic, all throughout the early 2000s. Same as with Toyota before them, this meant cutting import taxes, reducing shipping costs, but most importantly, being able to tailor each car to local preferences. In the US, that meant bigger, more comfortable sedans like the Sonata. In Europe, it meant compact hatchbacks like the i30. And in Asia, affordable small cars that could handle crowded cities. They also poured billions of dollars into research and design, even opening a European design center in Germany and a technical center to improve performance and safety. And the results were great, because now they weren't just seen as a cheap alternative anymore, because cars like the Santa Fe and Tucson became global hits, and suddenly they were serious contenders for the best-selling car brand. Their most effective move though was a marketing one. They added a 10-year warranty to every new car sale. This was to further prove that they truly believed they were not a cheap, low-quality brand. And it worked. People started trusting the company again. By the 2010s, Hyundai had become a global powerhouse, and by 2013 they would become the 4th best-selling car brand in the world. In 2015 they even launched their very own luxury line, the Genesis, in order to rival the likes of Lexus and BMW. For the most part, Hyundai was the only Korean brand on this list, and when a different one joined, it was one that was owned by the same group, Kia.
Smart inside, Sportage R.
기아 자동차.
In the early 2000s, Kia was mainly known for being cheap. Their cars were basic, uninspired, and mostly bought because they were affordable, not because people wanted them. But by the 2010s, that had started to change. Kia hired Peter Schreier, the designer behind the Audi TT, and with it introduced the Tiger Nose Grille, a new look for all new models. All of a sudden, Kia models started to look more unique and modern. They built factories in the US, Slovakia, China, and Mexico, allowing them to tailor cars to local markets. Models like the Sportage, Sorento, and the Quirky Soul became global hits, especially with younger buyers. Kia became one of the fastest growing car brands in the world, and for a while it seemed unstoppable. But as the decade went on, not everyone was sold. Critics said Kia was starting to look too aggressive, full of fake vents, oversized grilles, and glossy trim pieces that made their cars feel over-designed. So in 2021, Kia decided to hit the reset button. They completely rebranded themselves, even changing their iconic oval logo. They changed it into a connected line futuristic look. There was one big problem with their newer logo though. It looks like it says KN rather than Kia. So much so that once their newer models came out, Google searches for KN car skyrocketed, and people called it one of the worst logo redesigns ever. Yet in some strange way that really worked. Ever since their newer models released, Kia has been selling more cars than ever before. In 2024, 2 car brands from a different country would suddenly shoot up into this list. These were the Chinese giants that are Geely and BYD. For many years, Chinese car companies were considered cheap, low-quality knockoffs of Western designs. But by the early 2020s, 2 brands completely flipped that narrative, Geely and BYD. Geely started small in the late 90s, but its rise began when it bought Volvo in 2010. From that, it didn't just earn credibility, it also learned how to apply European design and safety standards to their cars. Cars like the Coolray, Tugela, and M Grand showed a huge leap in quality. They were stylish, packed with new features, and had a great interior. Instead of just copying, Geely started creating its own identity. Clean, Scandinavian-inspired design, bold tech interfaces, and fantastic hybrid cars to rival Toyota. And all of that, plus tons of luxury features like massive screens and advanced driver's aid, were all sold for about half the price of a Toyota or Hyundai. These cars are so cheap that many Western countries started applying massive tariffs on them. In most of Europe, these tariffs go up to the 30 or 40% mark, but in some countries like the US and Canada, they can reach up to 100%. BYD first appeared on this list in 2023 as they were selling over 2 million cars per year, and ever since they have been steadily rising the ranks. But they were not the only company coming out of China to suddenly change the car market. There was also BYD. After massive government grants and incentives for building EVs in China, BYD took full advantage of that. As a company, they were already the world's leading EV battery producer, so it just made sense to continue into making cars. And thanks to Chinese government grants, they're able to do so at an incredible price point. Additionally to the grants, they are also designing everything in-house, like batteries, motors, and even chips, giving them the ability to push their cars' prices even lower. Models like the Atto 3, Han, and Seal became bestsellers not just in China, but in a large chunk of Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America as well. By 2023, BYD had overtaken Tesla as the world's top EV maker, and by 2025 it became the third best-selling car brand in the world. Ever since the pandemic, the world has changed a lot, and this is also true for the car market, as new companies join the best sellers and old titans disappear from the list. The question is, which direction will this trend continue in? Will BYD overtake Toyota and make EVs the new standard? Will some new company pop out of another developing nation and overtake all of the other brands listed here? Or will older brands like Volkswagen, Ford, and Chevrolet retake the spotlight? Well, all we can do is wait. Until then, check out our other videos. Have a good one and see you next time.